welcome to the Molecule Pod by Eurogas. In this latest edition, we look into the social aspects of the energy transition, what this means in de-industrialised parts of Europe, why the gas and other sectors need to reskill and train workers and become more inclusive. And we talk about the steps being taken by policymakers and industry towards a truly just transition as we push hard to decarbonise European economies. I'm delighted to be joined by two guests today. Jens Geier has been a member of the European Parliament, MEP, since 2009 and is a hugely active member of the Socialists and Democrats, the S&D group. I'm also joined by Bronagh O'Hagan, who is External Relations Director here at Eurogas. She'll take us into ambitions for a just transition for workers, right here in the EU. Hello there and welcome to the Molecule Pod, Mr. Geier and Bronagh O'Hagan. It's great to have you on with us today.
Hi, Matthew.
Hello.
Great. So listen, we have a lot of things to get through today, during which we're going to discuss social issues within the energy sector and the just transition. But first of all, I have some questions for Mr. Geier. First of all, Mr. Geier, you've been involved in social issues for quite some time. It's very much a hallmark of what you do as an MEP, and you attach a great deal of importance to it. But how did you come to work on social issues in the first place? Could you perhaps give us some background on your career and how you got to this place?
It has not so much to do with my career. It has to do with the place where I come from. My hometown is Essen in the Ruhr area. And when I was a teenager, that was pretty much a town that was heavily industrialized. And there were a lot of mines and steel mills. And so we had a lot of working class people. And I was really infuriated by all the inequality that I saw. And all the social injustice, the poverty, and all the lost potentials by people who could not afford a proper education, and that made me a social democrat. And I think there is no socialist that is not into social issues, because this is where we come from.
Indeed. No, thank you, Mr. Geier. It certainly rings true with many of us. Whether, like myself, we come from the west of Scotland, or Bronagh, I believe, who comes from the north of Ireland. So, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that, Mr. Geier. Increasingly, again, not in your life, but in your career as an MEP, you've been working on the just transition. Perhaps I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that, about what it means for you, and especially try and put it in context. Because, I mean, since Russia invaded Ukraine, the pathway for that in our sector, in the energy sector, has become quite complex. So we're dealing with social issues alongside climate issues and energy security issues. So do you think that there is a sufficient focus on the social issues now and on the just transition?
Probably we do not focus on the social issues too much. Just transition is also a question who can afford it. And it will bring a lot of structural change to industry and the economy altogether. It is threatening people. It is making them anxious in the moment. We see that pretty much in Germany, that a lot of people are stopping to support the transformation because they are afraid of social consequences. And of course, the transformation will fail if we lose the support of the people. We cannot afford to lose the support of the people, and they have to rely on that they can afford their houses, that the green energy is not much more costly than the energy they have today, that they are not going to lose their jobs. And this has to be done by a social transformation. So Franz Timmermans has put it with the words, the transformation will either be a social one or it will fail. And I think he's absolutely right with that. So we have to take into account the social consequences of the transformation, and we have to take into account that it is just one, that we don't lose the people, that we keep their support, and that we at the end give them a better life and not one that is more threatening. And because that is that nails it when it comes to the idea of social democrats, how to do the transformation, and that is also how I see my political mission here.
Thank you, Mr. Geier, and really important, crucial, in fact, that you're putting people front and center of any such transition. It's really good to hear. Mr. Geier, about your work in the European Parliament, obviously as part of the Socialists and Democrats grouping, you have been the European Parliament the rapporteur on the gas directive. Now, can I ask about the priorities that you had for that? Because obviously, we have much broader efforts to decarbonise and push for a just transition. But what specifically in your role as rapporteur of that directive were you really trying to achieve? What were your main objectives there?
So again, one of the motivation comes from my home area. So when we want to save the planet, we have to bring down CO2 emissions, and that cannot all be done by green electricity, because energy intensive industry needs a different source, and that can only be brought by molecules and not by electrons. So again, I'm thinking about the further perspectives of jobs and heavy industry and energy intensive industry here, because I'm absolutely convinced that we need these parts of energy to do the transition. So the windmills in the North Sea, they have a basement of steel, and I want that the steel is produced in Europe and not elsewhere. So we need green molecules, and that can be done by hydrogen produced by green energy. One on the one hand, and on the other hand, we should take into account all the energy sources that we already have. I'm talking about sector coupling. And because of that, I made the proposal that the communities in Europe should start to make planning about their energy support for the future, trying to find out how much sources of energy they have already in town, in order to just fill the gaps. That will become a law, a federal law in Germany very shortly. But I know also municipalities, for example, Vienna, who are doing that already in order to find out which sources of energy they have, and then to close the gap either with electricity, green electricity, or green molecules. Let me give you just an example. So the biggest European steel mill is in my home area at Duisburg, and they are going to replace a conventional blast furnace by a direct reduction installment that will be run with green hydrogen in the future. So there will be electrolyzers installed close to the steel mill in the final stage that will have a capacity of 500 megawatts, so quite a few. And these electrolyzers produce heat by producing hydrogen, and the enterprise who will run these electrolyzers will use this waste heat to fill the heat in their distant heating network. So this is an example for the sector coupling I'm talking about, and I'm pretty sure that there is a lot of unused potential that we can use for the transition, for energy savings, and for also for new business cases. And I think we can. I think in English you say you can catch three birds with one stone.
Yes, to kill two birds with one stone. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I mean. And this is pretty much what we're talking about. So secondly, that was one aim. Secondly, how do we get the gas industry into transition what they want. And the proposal of the Commission was, absolutely not satisfying, because they imagined, obviously, Europe as an undiscovered continent where nothing is existing. No pipelines, no gas providers, nothing. And everybody from the stakeholder side tell me, we want to transform, we want to get into hydrogen, but we will not start investing if we have to sell all our networks in 10 years. And that was pretty convincing to me. So I changed the whole unbundling system to a new one that sets on the situation that we have already in Europe, with a district operational service, with transport operation services, and keeping the gas industry where it is, but forcing it to transform, but also using their skills in supporting the transition. This is a totally different approach, but it found a lot of support from Parliament side. So I have the support from 5 out of the 7 political groups we have on the Parliament.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Geier. No, really comprehensive overview. I appreciate the way that you're really bringing it home and talking about communities, because whether it's about Duisburg or whether anywhere else in Germany and Austria and far beyond, and of course, just again back to the legislative front, there are processes, there's a whole bubble here in Brussels where the work has to be done in order to bring this legislation that can really affect communities positively. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk about that. That's great, Mr. Geier. I suppose my final question would again be going. I suppose talking about a bit more legislation that we're seeing in the recent months, and that is the Net Zero Industry Act. So this is making headlines. This is making waves here in Europe, whether it's in the context of a response to the American Inflation Reduction Act or whatever. But I wanted to ask you about skills, because the reason I want to ask you about that is because, again, we want to focus on a just transition. We want to upskill, reskill, train people to be able to move from the gas sector into decarbonise the renewable gases or into other sectors. Do you think that the Net Zero Industry Act and the current conversation in Brussels has a good enough focus on skills? I mean, is this going in the right direction for you? National level, regional level, local specificities that we're seeing. Are we actually paying enough attention to this, or do you think we're really missing a trick here?
From my German perspective, I would say yes. But I can imagine that some of the other member states are paying not so much attention on the skill side. So, firstly, the EU, what is a pity, has not so much competence when it comes to education and skilling. But when you want to exploit the common market the most, you have to address the situation that a university or a craftsman degree that has been made by a person in one state has to be acknowledged in another state, and this is also true when we look at the transformation. When we look at the demand of Germany alone, we would need 100,000 of craftsmen in the near future to transformation. I'm talking about solar panels on roofs. I'm talking about alternative heating system. I'm talking about all the work that has to be done on houses to save energy, to make housing more energy efficient. And the answer, of course, cannot be that we buy just away the workforce from other EU countries, because who would then do the work there? So we have to have some immigration here. We have to find workforce, but also we have to reskill people in areas who are not fit for transformation anymore to give them a new job perspective. And also this is something of the social issues we'll talk about. Give the people a perspective for the future. and that they will not end up in poverty, and you will probably have more support than otherwise. So I think it is right to focus on the skills, but unfortunately, the Commission cannot force member states. They have to come to grips by themselves. But I hope they do so.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Geier. I appreciate that. Certainly, food for thought, and yeah, an area of concern. I think a little bit concerned about perhaps lack of progress and perhaps in some fronts in that regard. At least that's what I'm hearing from you. I suppose at this stage, Mr. Geier, I'll switch to our second guest here today, because I think we need to talk about skills, Bronagh. And Bronagh O'Hagan, you're head of external affairs here at external relations, here at Eurogas. And I was just wondering what exactly the gas sector is doing about this, or at least one particular part of it, which is Eurogas as the employer's representative in the EU's sectoral social dialogue for gas. This is something which has come up quite recently, or at least we've been working on only in the past couple of years. Bronagh, could you come in at this stage and tell me exactly what we're doing about skills? Yeah.
Happily, Matthew. Thank you very much. This indeed has been a big focus, particularly in the last few years. I joined Eurogas myself in March 2021, and in the first years in this post, I was for 2 years actually coordinator of an EU funded project along with EPSU and Industrial Europe as the representatives of the trade unions. And we worked with an independent consultant at Syndex to really map exactly what is going on in Europe. What is the employment makeup of the gas sector right now, and what do we need to do to prepare and future proof as as a key theme to really future proof this sector, so it's playing its role properly in decarbonisation and indeed in serving the workers and the communities around them, to make sure that that they have the right skills, that they have the opportunity for what we call job to job transition. Jobs will change, we know that. And a big point, a main kind of takeaway from this report, actually, from this mapping and the roadmap that the unions put in place, is that there is a gap. And that's not surprising, but I think it's important that it's confirmed by an independent study. There is a gap in terms of the skills to scale up everything that we need to decarbonize this sector. So that's hydrogen, it's biomethane, it's carbon capture, storage, utilization, and also the digitalization aspect. There's a lot of findings here that are super interesting. I could really talk about them all day, but I won't. But in short, I can say this is about granularity. We need to really understand what happens at the national level, at the local level, at the company level. We need to probably continue to monitor that, and that includes a continued focus from all parties involved in really strong social dialogue. Without the very strong social dialogue, we're not going to have the understanding of what needs to be done. And something else that came up in this report, and I think it's very important to note this as well. There is an issue in the sector of diversity and inclusion. We are not doing well in terms of gender balance at a number of different levels, from the shop floor to the strategic decision makers. And while we absolutely must use existing infrastructure and support the existing workforce, we have an opportunity, and closely linked to what Jens Geier has just said as well. This must involve the national level education authorities. We have an opportunity to redress this balance in terms of gender inclusion, taking even an intersectional approach. So we don't just think about gender, we must think at the same time about other kinds of discrimination, and move to bring some balance through the period of the transition, because like the skills gap, it's also self-evident that inclusion boosts innovation. So if we want to innovate, we need diversity in thinking, and that means improving the diversity in the workforce as well.
Many thanks indeed, Bronagh. No, really appreciate that. Yes, I suppose at this stage, I think we should just ask Mr. Geier if he would like to rebound on that in any way. Do you have any specific thoughts on the sectoral social dialogue for gas that's underway at the moment, Mr. Geier?
Yes, I think what Eurogas is doing on that field is going in the right direction. I'm also very content to see that you have started a close social dialogue with the trade unions, and I'm a trade unionist myself, and I come from a country where employees' participation is a tradition and part of the German economical success story. So I can only strongly support that that sort of dialogue with the workers and this form of employee participation, because finally it's their jobs what we're talking about, and it's their job that have to transform when we transform the gas sector. And I think it is a form of empowerment for them and keep them on board and keep them content with what we are doing, and when they feel that they are part of the process. And so I'm very happy that Eurogas is going that way.
Many thanks, Mr. Geier. Bronagh, how does that relate to what you're doing? I think there's more to add in this subject, no?
There's a lot to add, and yeah, it really is so important. We, of course, at Eurogas will remain committed to very strong social dialogue. It's very obviously a key part of achieving on the energy transition, and it's wonderful that we have this report and we have a new level of understanding. We didn't have that previously, but a report is a report. So what are we going to do about it? And that's where the roadmap is important. So the independent consultants, with the guidance from the steering committee of the workers and the employers, did put together a roadmap for us with very clear recommendations, and along with points like we mentioned already, the engagement at national level, the collaboration with education authorities, the continued strong social dialogue. There was also the point to use mechanisms at the EU level to have proper structure around this. And what we have done as a result of that, with EPSU, Industrial Europe, Eurogas, we wrote a joint letter to the European Commission, and we put the request to the Commission to enter into formal negotiations. I believe we now have the support from the European Commission. They will host, over the course of the next 9 months, a number of negotiation meetings. These are towards an EU framework agreement that can land either in a collective agreement that's binding in the statutes of the participating associations, or the option is there if it is suitable for a council directive. Because, like I say, it's great to have a report. It's great to have that level of insight, but we need continued insight. We need to continue to look at the landscape, and we need to start talking about commitments in terms particularly of training, of reskilling, of addressing this gender issue, and job-to-job transitions, where job-to-job transitions are going to be possible for the companies that this is relevant to.
Thank you so much, Bronagh. No, that's really comprehensive, and I think the word here is action, and seeing progress across all these fronts. So at this stage, I would really just thank you so much, both for joining the Molecule Pod today. Thank you so much, Bronagh, and thank you so much, Mr. Geier. That was a really instructive conversation. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Molecule Pod. You can catch all our episodes on Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.